Patrick and Cade, welcome to lesson 12.03, all about shipping. We're moving along right here through the pre-manufacturing module in the manufacture phase. Let me go ahead and get started. All right, all about shipping. Today we're covering three things. There's going to be a lot filled into these three components of this lesson. So number one is FBA versus FBM. Number two, international freight. Number three, domestic freight. Okay. So first, FBA versus FBM. So as you probably know by now, fulfillment by Amazon is the long spell out version of the acronym FBA. Okay. So there's three different ways that you can have products fulfilled on Amazon when you are selling on the platform, right? First one is that I've got listed here is fulfillment by Amazon, FBA. That's where Amazon handles everything from when the customer places the order to when they ship out the order to the customers, and if the customer needs to return the item as well, or if they need customer service, that's all handled by Amazon. That's the fulfillment by Amazon. Okay, they're also storing your product, of course, in the warehouse, in warehouses, in their centers. So yeah, so that's fulfillment by Amazon. The next one is fulfillment by merchant, and you can fulfill by merchant by using third-party logistics company, which is where you're partnering with another company that has warehousing and they have a shipping system set up to where they will store your goods for you instead of Amazon doing it with the FBA. This party logistics company can store your goods and then they will ship them as the orders come in to Amazon for your product. Okay, and then the third option down there in the green is fulfillment by merchant, FBM, right? But this is the same as the second one, but we're talking about seller fulfillment. So especially if you're just starting out, you may already have some experience shipping items. We find that especially during the holiday season, one of my clients last year, it's gotten a little bit buggered up at times during the holiday, especially in the last year or two since COVID, and it's been difficult to get inventory in stock when you need it quickly during November and December. So when you're going to run out too soon, it's a good idea to have a backup solution in place so that when you get orders to your product listing on Amazon, that you can fulfill those orders and remain active and still selling. And so one of my clients, he did this last year. He went ahead and created a mirrored listing to his FBA listing, and he mirrored that listing with another offer for fulfillment by merchant. And he was storing product in his own warehouse already, in his own storage units, and so he started taking orders when FBA wasn't working for him anymore for a week or whatever, and he started taking orders and fulfilling them himself. So that's fulfillment by merchant, seller. Now I can go into this even more in depth, and you could be a fulfillment by merchant by seller, and you could have seller fulfilled prime. And that's a whole nother process you got to go through to get approved. You got to go through a trial period where they make sure that you can make all the shipments within the 2-day window, to where you promise you're going to ship them within the 2-day window for the prime shipping badge. So it pretty much just gives you the prime shipping badge on your listings if you're seller fulfilled prime certified. Okay, that's a whole nother thing, but that's still, you would be using either a third-party logistics company to be seller fulfilled prime, or your own process in your own warehouse, or in your shipping from your storage units, whatever you're doing, right? Okay, so that's the three options here. There's advantages and disadvantages to each of them, right? Fulfillment by Amazon, as you can see there, has the most advantages above any of these other two. Okay, now these advantages and disadvantages can fluctuate over time. It just depends on what stage of the game you are in with your business, how many channels you're selling on, and then so these can change accordingly. All right, but if you're just starting out or in your early years, FBA is really the best way to go. It's super convenient. You have reduced shipping rates when you're shipping product into Amazon to store in their warehouses, you're getting to harness their reduced shipping rates, and therefore you pay a lot less to ship your goods out to the warehouses. And you also have the reduced shipping rates that they're paying when they ship product to the customers. So what they're charging you, like say compared to a third-party logistics company to fulfill an order, the shipping component of that, they're paying so much less than anybody else can to have product shipped. So your rates, that portion of your rates, are kept low. Your FBA fees. Okay, so I'm not saying FBA fees are low compared to what it would cost you to get it done yourself or with a 3PL. But what I am saying is that their reduced shipping rates kind of roll downhill to you in a couple different ways. All right, you get more selling power on Amazon because you get that Prime badge. Right, it's a fast system to follow. The suppliers and freight forwarders are familiar with FBA. It's easier for sellers with many products and or far to ship. Right, because they're managing it all for you, right? And you're getting to use their shipping carriers at the highly reduced rate, okay? Customer service is included. You don't have to worry about that. And FBA handles the returns, okay? The disadvantages, you are at the mercy of Amazon rules and regs, and this can include some extra things when it comes to hazardous goods and child-related products and so on. Fees can get expensive. Those FBA fees can add up, right? And over time, as you scale, you could definitely do it less expensively using a third-party logistics company, depending on if you find a good one and how you go about doing that. You must return the merchandise to you. Sometimes you have to have the merchandise returned to you if in a bind with Amazon. Okay, so if there's trouble with your listing and they're the ones storing it, and you need to redo a listing, like say create a new ASIN. And have a new listing, which it happens every now and then you have to have it return all those goods to you, so you can then ship them in tagged to that new listing. Okay, so if you were storing it yourself, you wouldn't have to have all those goods recalled, right? If you were doing fulfilled by merchant. All right, the fees are complex. Okay, obviously they're fees from an outside entity, so they're going to be more complex than if you just were doing it yourself. And it's difficult to physically bundle products when Amazon is fulfilling for you because you have to bundle them yourself and then ship them in, right? Okay. The next one down there is fulfilled by merchant using third-party logistics. Okay. The advantages, there's no strict weight dimensions or regulations such as with FBA. You can avoid Q4 or long-term storage fees that Amazon charges. It's oftentimes cheaper and more stable, right? I said once you get it scaled, if you're moving a lot of product around, it can be cheaper, right? And more stable, meaning you don't have to have product returned to you. And you also don't have to worry about fluctuations during the holiday period of time on if you're using FBA, right? The 3PLs are more stable month to month, year to year. Flexibility to transfer units to FBA, right? They can transfer units and send units wherever you want them to, whether it be to individual customers or to other 3PL companies or to Amazon FBA, right? You could do both. There's no FBA fees, okay? There's no FBA fees. So you're seeing a lot more cash coming in from your Amazon business. Yes, you have to pay the 3PL company, but you're getting paid more from Amazon. So you're not losing out on those FBA fees, and you're not hinged to those. And as they change and they increase all the time, right? Okay. Disclaimer: FBA fees do increase, usually about once a year, but they don't increase a tremendous amount, right? It's a few percentage points, maybe even 5%, but it's not, 50% higher this year than it was last year. Disadvantages: it's difficult to find the best freight forwarder / 3PL. There's no reduced shipping rates that you get if you're working with Amazon. Now, I say no reduced shipping rates. There is reduced shipping rates, but they're probably not going to be as drastically reduced as Amazon gets with their partner carriers. That once again, when you're an FBA seller and you're shipping your stuff to Amazon, you get to use their partner programs and their partner rates that they've set up. Amazon extends those to us when we're shipping goods to them. You don't get that with third-party logistics companies. least not as much. And if you're not seller fulfilled prime, then you are at a sales disadvantage using a 3PL, right? FBA, if FBA is handling your shipments for you, you're automatically got that prime badge. If a 3PL is, you have to have that seller fulfilled prime certification in order to get the prime badge. Okay, so if you don't have that certification, then you don't get the prime badge, and you sell less product if you don't have the prime badge. Okay, fulfillment by merchant. Not always do you sell less product. It depends on the product, but for the most part, you want that prime badge. Last section here, fulfillment by merchant. And this is, you handle it as the seller. Got your own warehouse, your own storage unit. You got your kids handling it all for you. It's not going through another company like Amazon or the third-party logistics companies. Okay, so there's some advantages to it. No strict weights or dimensions regs. You're the one handling it. You get to decide how you are shipping things. Avoid quarter 4 or long-term storage fees of Amazon, of course, because you're paying for your own storage. Storage units don't charge more during the holidays, during the quarter 4, for storing things, whereas Amazon does. Okay, flexibility and control over customer service. You are the customer service at that point. You get to be the customer service. No FBA fees at all. Again, you see a lot more money coming from your Amazon payments. And you get control over bundling, fragile, or special products. You get to see every single product that gets shipped out to a customer, right? Because it's going through you. Disadvantages, it takes your time. Oh my gosh, it's like a whole other job, right? You must reinvent the wheel with new systems. You got to get systems in place that handle all these logistics. And if you're selling a lot of products widely across geographies, then it can be a detriment. Okay, because if you're only shipping from your one warehouse in, say, California, and somebody orders from New York, it's costly to get it across the country in a short amount of time. Whereas with FBA, they're dispersing product all throughout the country, and they can get it shipped fast no matter where it's ordered from, right? You can't do that if you're doing seller fulfillment by merchant and you're storing it in one warehouse where you're at. Now, there is some sellers that have warehouses that they open up, at various locations around the country that they're selling in. But now you're becoming your own third-party logistics company, right? Once you start opening up multiple warehouses and have multiple places to store and ship stuff from, you're scaling yourself into a full-on shipping company, okay? Last disadvantage, no reduced shipping rates. Again, you don't get to harness those Amazon reduced shipping rates if you're shipping things yourself. All right. Second section of this lesson, international freight. Hold on to your hats, folks. Sea versus air. We're going to go through about 5 subsections of this international freight of the lesson. First, we're going to talk about sea versus air. So sellers should factor in and then compare sea versus air side by side. Okay. The size and weight of the shipments determines whether you go with sea versus air. There's storage costs that determine whether you go sea versus air. And there's time frame. Okay. How quick you need to get stuff there. How quick you could afford to get stuff there. So what we're talking about here is when you're talking about sea shipping versus air shipping, if you're importing from another country into the United States and it's having to go over an ocean, right? It's having to come from a long ways away. Well, not even over an ocean. You could be ordering something from South America and it could take a boat along the ocean to get up to the United States. Not necessarily having to fly over an ocean if you're shipping from South America and you're using air shipping, right? It's we're talking about when you're shipping international freights, when you're shipping things from a long distance away from another country, right? Typically Asia is what we're talking about. All right. So there's these factors that you should take a look at in these 3 I just mentioned when you're deciding whether to go sea versus air. Here is a quick table. For instance, if you're going from Asia to the United States, okay, you want to choose sea shipping if it's for those things in the left column. If it's a larger shipment, if it's a large product, both of those reasons is because it's costly to airship. It's a lot more costly to airship bigger things, right? Jets only hold so much, and they're going so fast that they use a lot of fuel, so they cost more to ship, but they arrive quickly. 1 to 4 or 5 days. 1 to 4 or 5 days. Typically, if you're shipping from China to the United States, you can get it landed between 3 and 7 days in the United States. Now, if you're going 7 days, it's probably going to take a little while because they're not putting you at the front of the list, so they have to get you scheduled on a plane or on a jet, and so that's why the 3 to 7 days. Yes, it only takes half a day or whatever to fly from China to the United States, depending on where you're going, but it's just a matter of how much you're paying and how quick of a shipping rate you're paying on the air side. So if it's a larger shipment or it's a larger product, you're going to want to eventually move all your shipping across the sea. Okay, a lot less expensive. If you can wait 14 to 45 days, sea shipping definitely is the way to go. It costs you less, unless you have a super tiny product, like let's say you're shipping coins, right? Or this little Rubik's Cube. This is your product, let's say. You can fit, and this is really light, by the way. You can ship a bunch of these, tons of them. Like you can ship 2,000 of these in a couple boxes, and it's really light. It might cost you a couple $100 to ship 1,000 of these. Via air, it costs you the same or more to ship them via sea because you're only talking a couple boxes. You got to go find space on a ship in a container with just a couple of boxes. Okay, so there is products out there that, especially the tiny ones, that ship via air. It's faster. It actually can be the same cost or cheaper than sea shipping. Okay, so but if you can wait 14 to 45 days and you got a medium to large product, ship by sea. Okay, scaled large number of units. Let's say you're shipping 20,000 units and you are taking up an entire container full's worth of space. That's going to be significantly less expensive, significantly, than shipping by air. Okay, now when you want to ship by air is with those smaller shipments, like less than 3 large boxes, 3 large 24-inch by 24-inch by 18-inch, say, boxes. If you got fewer than 1 or 2 of those, then go ahead and go by air, because there's kind of a minimum cost when it comes to sea shipping, because there's a lot of extra charges as it goes through the, and we kind of explained this in the last lesson, as it goes through the sea shipment process. There's so many steps and people handling it on the way that there's always fees associated with all those little steps, right? Whereas when you put it on a plane, it skips all the bull, skips all the being unloaded and loaded at the ports, right? That's the main thing. You don't have to load it on the boat and then load it off the boat. Yeah, it has to be loaded on the plane and then off the plane, but it's usually a smaller batch, a smaller shipment. It happens a lot quicker. Right, happens a lot quicker. You don't have to store it near the port for a couple days going and a couple days, on the back end. So air shipping, smaller shipments. You want to air ship if you need it delivered within 7 days, right? And for scaled large number of units, I put a small check mark on this one because, especially on your first shipment in, or quite often your second, third, fourth, fifth shipments in, depending on your timing and your turnaround time from when you order to when you're stocked, sometimes you're not going to be able to get that sea shipment quite there in time before you run out of inventory on Amazon. And so what you can do is let's say you're shipping 1,000 units, maybe you'll ship 800 of them by sea, and at the same time have 200 of them leave by air. So you'll have 200 units show up within 7 days, and then you'll wait another, couple weeks, maybe even 3-4 weeks for the sea shipment to arrive. But you've got those first 200 units that arrive by air within the week that you can start selling right away while you're waiting on the sea shipment. Okay, that's why the little check mark is there with the sea, because you can go most of them by sea, a couple units by air, 20% by air. And samples, you want to do samples by air, unless you really want to spend a year researching and sourcing and manufacturing a product and getting it to market. If you really want to dilly-dally and take your time, then you could have your samples sent by sea depending on the size of it. Let's say you're getting a sample for a couch, maybe you want to go by sea. If you're getting a sample for a small children's toy like this, you're not going to go by sea. Obviously, you're going to go by air, and you want to get your samples quick. You want to analyze this product idea. Remember, first to market wins. So anytime you can speed up the process, especially if it means the difference between 7 days and 17 or 37 days, definitely go with the quicker option. Okay, so that's discussion of going, say, for instance, from Asia to the United States. That would apply to, if you're ordering from India, which is South Asia, is when you're shipping from afar to the United States, internationally. Okay. Second component of this international freight, LCL versus FCL. Okay. Simple. And then we're talking about sea shipping containers. Okay. That's what LCL and FCL refer to. So if you see LCL, it means less than a container load. Shippers share the container with other shipments. You only pay for the space used, right? So imagine a shipping vessel that's just stacked with all those shipping containers. All those metal containers, they're all stacked upon each other and side by side. And the ship, it's a big flat ship stacked with shipping containers. It's full. Some of those are filled with just one company's, one importer's products. Some of them are shared amongst a lot of different importers in one container. That's a less than a container load. If you're going to be only filling up part of the container, then you're going to be, paying for LCL shipping, LCL sea freight. Okay. FCL is a full container load. Obviously, the shipper bears the cost of the entire container for a single shipment. And even if you don't fill it up, okay, you're charged by the container. Okay. Different sizes of containers, as you can see here. Kind of interesting. You can see what they hold in weight, gross weight in kilograms. You got the 20 footers and the 40 footers. And the HQ containers. Those HQs are about a foot taller than the other ones, and they're used if you're shipping something that doesn't quite fit in the smaller, a little bit shorter regular containers. Okay, so that's HQ. And you can see that there in the dimensions, right? You can see that there in the dimensions. Okay. So, yeah, that's just a few different container sizes. Next section, using freight forwarders. All right. What is a freight forwarder? So a freight forwarder is like a shipping agent. Okay. And it's an organization that assists with transporting goods from the factory, which we're talking about, often overseas. If you're shipping from overseas, you're best served using a freight forwarder. We'll talk more about that here in a bit. But you're shipping from the factory to locations in the U.S., such as Amazon distribution centers, right? You can use freight forwarders. And what they do is they handle the whole kit and caboodle, or the pieces at least you hire them to handle, as we talked about in the last lesson, right? We've shown the graph of the whole manufacturing phase. If you're hiring a freight forwarder, they can, with the whole, the transport of your goods from factory to Amazon, the freight forwarder can cover some of that or all of it. Okay. So that's what you're paying them for, various pieces along the way of what they're going to do. They might only handle the sea shipment part for you. You might be paying an FOB price, a freight on board, or free on board, which means the supplier is going to transport those goods to the ship. And then at that point, they're going to be, the freight forwarder takes and handles the shipping from, handles all the logistics and the paying of the shipping with your money from the time it got on the boat to the time it, say, arrived at the Amazon distribution center and everything in between. The freight forwarder could handle that part of it. Freight forwarder, you might do an EXW price, for instance. You might have got quoted EXW, which means you're responsible for arranging the logistics from the factory all the way to Amazon. And you could have your freight forwarder handle all of that for you. Okay. What does a freight forwarder actually do, right? They handle freight transportation arrangement, tracking of the freight transport, Organizing storage along the way. Remember all the storage you have to have at the ports, and you know, especially at each of the ports, you have to have a place to store the goods while it's waiting to be, you know, to get on the boat or to pass through customs on the way out. They can arrange warehousing if you need it. They can negotiate freight charges for you. They do freight consolidation, customs clearance, export documentation preparation. These last two are big ones, so you don't have to deal with paperwork and U.S. customs, right? Product inspections, customs clearance, short-term storage, and ultimately they can help you save time and money, right? Yes, you have to pay them. It's an additional cost, but when you're talking about spending thousands on shipping goods, if they can save you a significant amount in the logistics process and they only charge you a portion of that they saved you, you're ahead of the game, right? Here's some terminology. Bill of lading. This is a contract that accompanies your shipped goods made between carrier and shipper. Your freight forwarder will issue your bill of lading form. Okay, I'm going to show you an example of a bill of lading here in a second. Another term, export license. If your supplier does not have an export license, your freight forwarder will have to issue one. As the client, you will never see your export license. However, your freight forwarder needs it to export from China, for instance. Inspection certificate. This is a commodity based for more specialized products. Okay, if you need to get them inspected so they can get through customs. This is, you know, if it's food items, you know, things like that. Here's a bill of lading example. All right, and if you want to see where I got this information from, you can go to that link, and it explains the various components of the bill of lading. Now, you know, your bill of ladings, they kind of depend on who's issuing them, right? Who's creating them. So they can look different, but they tend to have the same components. They have shipper information. They have the consignee information. In other words, who's handling the exporting and who's handling the importing, right? So there's information from where it's leaving from to where it's going to. The party to be notified information is there. Here's an important one, number 4, the bill of lading tracking number. Okay, that's an important number, right? The flight detail, voyage or flight details explains what's going on along the way, how it's being transferred and transported. So it's kind of detail of its passage. You've got cargo details, number 6. That's where this really needs to be explained, and those categories we're going to be talking about coming up here need to be chosen correctly so that the product that's in the boxes or in the cargo containers is actually what we tell, what we say it is here in item number 6. So you got to explain what your goods are and what category they fit in and whatnot here. They have to do them properly, or you could be slapped, and it could slow up your shipment. Okay, so that's cargo details, and then lastly is the contact details. You know, there might be your freight forwarder on there, or it might be you. Okay. Next term, commercial invoice. A commercial invoice is used for export, showing China what exactly you're exporting and for showing your destination country what you plan to import, like contents, quantity, and value you should put on there. You will receive a commercial invoice from your supplier. Okay. Packing list. This discloses the number of boxes and units per box, pallets or no pallets, etc. You will also get this from your supplier. Special certificates. These are special documentation that will be required if you are shipping children's products, medical devices, or anything with soil seeds that require USDA approval. Okay. Last couple terms, entry summary. This is a document you receive from U.S. Customs after you pay your import duty. An entry summary shows the value of goods declared to customs and maintains shipment records. Okay, your freight forwarder will give an entry summary to you after your shipment has cleared customs in the U.S. And lastly, proof of delivery. Once the delivery order is signed by the appropriate personnel at its destination, your freight forwarder will give you a proof of delivery document to verify its completed journey. Okay. All right, here's a list of resources that you can check out to get some quotes for various sea shipping, especially, or for third-party logistics companies that could help you, and especially for freight forwarders. Okay. I'm going to be going into the next lesson, which is all about sustainable transport. And there is some freight forwarders and some transport companies who you can use and go investigate others as well to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions and the fuel usage of your shipment, especially going across the ocean. Um, so I'll be discussing those in the next lesson. Okay. So that'll be all under sustainable shipping or sustainable transport. And yeah, so you might use a different freight forwarder or a different shipping company than what these resources show here. Freight class calculator. This really comes in handy when you're going to have your product shipped via freight from, say, the port to the Amazon distribution center. You need to know the freight class, because Amazon asks for it, of your shipment. And it's based upon, the size of your pallets and how many they are and the weight of them and whatnot, which will determine what freight class you're going to. Basically, what it tells Amazon is they need to know how much stuff is coming to their warehouse when you're going to be arriving. So that freight class calculator is kind of a standardized list of freight classes that we use here in the United States for whatever shipments are moving around via freight. Okay. Freight's a little bit different of a way to ship than, if you're an individual, you're probably used to maybe at Christmas time, you want to send some product or send some packages to families, say for Christmas presents or for, gifts across the country. And you got to go down to the UPS office at the UPS store and pay for shipping for your one little box, right? Well, you can still ship like that with your business if you're just shipping a few boxes. But let's say you have 50 boxes that fit on 6 different pallets. You can't really go down to the UPS store and tell them, I've got 6 pallets I want to ship across the country. You need a freight transport company. Now, UPS has UPS Freight. FedEx has FedEx Freight, right? They handle freight shipments as well as regular domestic shipments. Okay. But that's what freight shipping is. It's usually when we're saying domestic freight, we're talking about shipping pallets in the United States. Okay. Pallets of goods. All right. And then the harmonized tariff schedule that alludes to the, and I got the link I'll fix right there in the slides. The harmonized tariff schedule is all about that classification that we put on the bill of lading of your goods when we explained what the goods were. That tariff schedule, you have to pick, you have to find where your product fits within the tariff schedule, so the customs knows how much to charge you for tariffs on your goods. Okay, more about this here pretty quick. All right, so U.S. customs clearance, right? This is all about moving goods through customs so they can proceed to final destination. 4 steps. A customs officer examines your customs paperwork. Import duties and taxes are assessed using the customs paperwork. And remember, just talked about those tariff schedules. They're going to use those tariff schedules that you have listed on your bill of lading. That's the customs paperwork. That's part of the customs paperwork is the bill of lading that they're going to import duties and taxes are going to be assessed using that paperwork, right? Using that tariff schedule that you've chosen for your product or that your freight forwarder has chosen. Okay. Customs request, number 3, customs request payment for taxes and duties if applicable. And number 4, your shipment clears customs once all duties are paid. Now, there's a lot of paperwork, scheduling, payments, things that need to happen to clear U.S. customs, especially at a seaport, right? It's a lot easier when you ship stuff by air because the shipping company, say FedEx, DHL, UPS, the air shipping company, they're handling all these details for you, and then you're just paying, whatever duties and taxes you need to pay. But they're getting it to clear customs for you. The problem with U.S. customs clearance by a sea shipment is it's a lot more complicated. So if this looks complicated and sounds complicated, this is a really good reason why you want to hire a freight forwarder, because then they handle all this stuff for you. You might hear from them at the end of the process to say, hey, need you to pay the tariff and duties amount of this much, so we can get your stuff cleared from the port. And they handle everything else, right? So key documents for customs clearance include commercial invoices, packing slips, shipping labels, among some other things. Lastly here, taxes and tariffs. I'm just going to give you an example here, like makeup mirrors. If it's classified with the wrong code, such as a standing mirror, you could potentially be hit with a 20 to 25% tariff, right? Because you classified it as a standing mirror, and that charges a 20 to 25% tariff. Alternately, if you use the correct code, it could be a 0% to a small percentage tariff. If you use the correct code as a makeup mirror instead of a full standing mirror, it's a different tariff amount. It's a different tax amount, okay? Note, do not try to incorrectly classify products to save on tariffs. If you are caught manipulating codes, you could be blacklisted, okay? So there is all kinds of different, there's tariffs based upon what kind of goods they are. There's also tariffs and duties that is based upon where stuff's being shipped from, right? There was a import tax that was imposed for a lot of products a few years back by President Trump, where it could be up to 25% additional tariff if you were importing from China, for instance, okay? So there's quite a few different taxes and tariffs. If you let your freight forwarder handle this all for you and make sure that your supplier, they'll make sure that your supplier is giving you the right description and indicating those right descriptors on the paperwork that they're handling, if they are handling some paperwork, you're going to be a lot better off. There's going to be a lot less room for error, right? And pain and hassle for you, okay? So hire a freight forwarder is what I highly recommend. HTS Harmonized Tariff Schedule. There's the link I was promising. Tariffs are in universal codes by product category, as I was mentioning. You need to get those categories right on your product. Duties are indirect taxes that are imposed on the consumer of imported goods. Okay. Every product you import has a code which you can obtain from a freight forwarder or a customs broker, or you can ask your factory. All right. Last section of this lesson, the final section. I told you this one was going to be a full one, this lesson 12.03, is domestic freight. I already kind of dipped our toes into domestic freight, but let's go a little bit deeper into it, okay? Understanding domestic freight. When your goods arrive by sea, you'll be responsible for shipping costs to your final destination or destinations from the port, especially if a full container load, or from a nearby warehouse for less than a container load, right? You may have your product, remember our big graph of the manufacturing process, you may have your product land at the port, clear customs, and then be delivered to a third-party logistics warehouse, and then it'll go out from there again to the Amazon distribution center, okay? So the domestic freight, you're going to have two different domestic freights on that one from the port to the 3PL warehouse, and one from 3PL warehouse possibly out to the distribution center, depending on how much goods that the 3PL company is shipping for you to the Amazon distribution centers, right? That domestic freight is the movement of pallets of goods around, and it doesn't necessarily have to be palleted, but it's most often best if you have, enough product to deem worthy of being palletized, okay? Palletized meaning we're taking 6 boxes, stacking them in a cube on a pallet and wrapping that thing up. So when they're moving this stuff via domestic freight, then there's forklifts that are moving it, putting it on the truck, and there's forklifts that are picking it up when it gets delivered where it goes, taking it off the truck, moving it into the warehouse on the pallet with the forklift, right? As opposed to 5 or 6 individual boxes that people have to grab and carry, That's kind of the difference between freight and in a real simple way to put it, between freight and regular domestic shipping. Regular domestic shipping, individual boxes. Freight, pallets, clumps, groups of a lot of boxes. All right. And they don't have to be in boxes. We call them cartons when it's a box, a package that holds a bunch of individual units inside of it. Then we typically call that a carton. That's what the suppliers in Asia call them. But it's a shipping carton. It's holding a bunch of individual products. Okay, and freight would be a pallet or multiple pallets full of multiple cartons, and each carton has, could have hundreds of units each in it, in each carton. Makes sense? Product, bunch of those fit in a carton, bunch of cartons fit on a pallet. Okay, bunch of pallets can fit in a container, bunch of pallets can fit in a truck. There you go. There's your breakdown on the containers. All right. Estimating the cost of freight. Okay. Full containers usually cost about $1,200 to freight ship from the warehouse port to within 50 miles. All right. That's just an estimate. So if you have a full container, a 40-foot container, it's going to cost you about $1,200 to ship it from the port to the Amazon warehouse if it's within 50 miles. Less than a container load costs, $150 minimum, right? It's $150 minimum freight charge, $100 to $150 minimum freight, no matter how much you're picking up. You can multiply the 1,200x times the percent usage of the container load, right? So, for example, if you're using 50% of a container, like maybe you're sharing it with one other company, it's shipped across the ocean, you have half of the container full's worth of goods, then the freight cost is going to be based upon the amount of goods or the half container of goods. So you can just take that $1,200 and multiply by half, by 50% or 0.5, and you get about a $600 domestic freight charge to move it within 50 miles. Okay. Costs increase the further you have to ship goods domestically. Asia to USA sea shipping routes. This is important here. I interjected this one here because when we're talking about domestic freight, this is the shipping that has to happen from wherever your product lands at the ports or at the main hub you're having stuff delivered to. You have to pay these domestic freight charges to take it from the port to the final destination. You got to move it across the country somewhere. So as you can see here, from China, where these two big dash lines start from, shipping that green dash line to the West Coast, costs you some dollars. What it's going to cost you, a certain amount of dollars if you want to move it from that West Coast out to Kansas, let's say. Let's say Amazon wants you to send your product to Kansas. Ultimately, that's where you need to get it. But the boat stops at the coast. Let's say you goofed, and I'm going to show you here in a minute how you can keep from goofing. Let's say you had it shipped to the East Coast, right? And you have to, which costs more, it's further to go, right? From China, further to go. It's actually coming from Japan, usually, because it goes from China to Japan and then across the ocean. Goods going, they have to go through Central America, through the Panama Canal, and then up to the East Coast. That's all this is going to cost more sea shipping rate. The sea transport is going to cost more. But let's say you get it over there to the East Coast, but Amazon wants you to ship it to, California. Now you got to freight transport it all the way across the country. Okay? So it really matters where you have stuff shipped to, but it also matters where Amazon's telling you to ship it to. Okay? And we can kind of control where Amazon tells us to ship stuff in a roundabout, pro-hack, secret tactic way. Pro tip, when we create the FBA shipment, at which time Amazon FBA tells you which exact warehouse or warehouses to send your goods, we will change the ship from address to the Los Angeles Long Beach port address. This is pretty typical what we do. Now, if you're wanting your product to get to, say, your warehouse and you live on the East Coast, then domestic freight can cost as much as the sea freight, okay? Especially if you're shipping all the way across the country. So if you can have it sea shipped around through Central America and then over the East Coast, yeah, you're paying a little bit more for the sea shipment versus going to the West Coast. But now if you're needing to get that product to the East Coast, say to your own warehouse, then that's the best way to go, because now you don't have much domestic freight you have to pay. Okay. So you need to weigh your costs when it comes to where the sea shipment's going versus where your final destination is from the port via domestic freight. Okay. So we learned the hard way that if you tell FBA that you are shipping from somewhere else, such as your Chinese supplier's factory, FBA will tell you to send the goods to Dallas, or worse yet, somewhere in the eastern US. Costs to ship from where your goods originated are significantly higher if anywhere besides the West Coast. Said that because China is closer to the West Coast than it is the rest of the country, right? So that ocean travel, the further you get away from China, the more costly it is. Okay. But you got to consider the domestic freight in this whole equation as well. It's almost as important. Here's a case study. If we tell FBA that we are shipping from China, then it forces us to send our inventory to Dallas, Texas, in this case. Right? You can see there I put the ship from Patrick at somewhere in Jiamian, China. Amazon's system told me, okay, I want you to send it to Dallas. And you can see there I got less than a truckload, which is kind of like less than a container load, right? Okay, Amazon wants me to send that to Dallas. Like, well, poo. I know that's going to be costly. It's $600 just to move it 50 miles from the amount of goods I have, a half a container. It's $600 just to move it from the port in LA to a nearby within 50-mile warehouse. Now they want me to send it to Dallas. We're talking, $600, $700, $1,000 more, right? That's a lot of money. Okay, that's profits. But if we choose a California address to ship from, such as the port, and this is the pro tip here, FBA typically has us send it somewhere in California. Now, mind you, you getting the goods to the United States, that's on you. Amazon does not handle that for you, right? Their goal long-term is to have actual shipping vessels, and I think they've already got some, and to be able to handle shipment from its origination point, say in China, if you're having goods made in China. Amazon eventually wants to handle all of that transport to get it to the Amazon warehouses in the United States, because they want to get their hands on that entire process. They can streamline it. They can be in control of more points along the way. They can earn the money that gets paid for transport, so on and so forth. But at this point, where we tell them we're shipping it from really has no bearing on, like, they're not responsible for handling any of that shipment to get it from China to the United States. Okay, so we can tell them we're going to be shipping from the Amazon warehouse from California. Okay, because that's essentially where it's going. The last leg of the journey is the domestic freight from the port it landed at. And we tell them, okay, we're shipping from the port. When I did that here, I input that there in the yellow box. You can see here, I actually put my address up here in Northern California. And the Amazon system's like, okay, so you're shipping from Northern California. By the way, it does the same thing if you put the address for the LA port or the Long Beach port. The Amazon system goes and looks where you're shipping it from, and it tells you, okay, go ahead and send it to the Ontario, the Moreno Valley Distribution Center, which is in Los Angeles. Actually, in Orange County, I think. And that's going to be a lot less expensive to ship that short a distance compared to shipping it to Dallas. And the only thing that was different in this, them telling us to send it to Dallas versus them telling us to send it to California, from California, was our from address we put in the FBA shipment information. Okay, the ship from address. That's all I changed. It was the same goods, the same weight, the same product. Everything was the same except for ship from address was changed. I put ship from China. They tell us to send it to Dallas. I put ship from California. They tell us to ship it to California. You see that? That domestic freight charge is chopped when we tell them we're shipping it from California. Now, sometimes they'll tell you, okay, you're shipping it from California. Why don't you go and send it over to Phoenix, right? They're typically not going to tell you, why don't you go ahead and send it over to the East Coast, especially on a first-time shipment or a big shipment where you're resupplying your product, okay? So the system tries to tell you to ship it to the closest place that they can take it, because they know that they're going to receive it at that one warehouse, and then they're going to ship it out to 15 different warehouses themselves. So it's in their interest to save you some money, right? Because the more money you save on your shipment, the more profit you make, the lower you keep your prices on your product, and the more money they make, the more buys they get on that product, and they get their share of that, right? So it's in their best interest for you to pay less to transport your goods. They're already going to move them around anyway. What does it matter if they move them around from West Coast and spread them across, or they take them from West Coast to the central United States and then spread them out? What does it matter if they do that, or if they have you send them all the way to the East Coast and then they have to spread them all back out the other way, right? They're going to spread them around anyway. They might as well make it easier on you and less costly on you. In the blue box up there, it says, and we can use their partner carriers. So when I indicated we were shipping from China, they didn't give me the option to use their partner carriers. They're assuming that I'm handling the shipping arrangements for that whole leg of the journey. I can't use their partner carriers. But if I put shipping from California, then these new boxes come up on the shipment creation in the FBA system that allow me to, hey, do you want to use one of our partner carriers? Cool, check that box. Here's what it's going to cost you to ship it. That's $113 they're charging me to ship it from Northern California to Southern California. And I think it was, 150 pounds of product, right? It's only 113 bucks for me to ship 150 pounds. If I was shipping that to Dallas, it would be 4 times that, okay? All right. If I was shipping to Southern California without using a partner carrier, it would be twice that, right? If I were to go out just as an individual and order a domestic freight company to come pick up my goods in Northern California and ship them to Southern California, it's 150 pounds worth. It's going to cost more than what Amazon pays the same carrier to ship. They get preferred rates. So whenever we can use their preferred rates, such as in this case, we do it. Using Amazon's preferred carriers, typically only available if you're shipped from addresses shown within the US, right? So again, if you list ship from address of China, you will not be able to ship using Amazon's preferred partner carrier rates. Amazon has obtained the lowest shipping rates of any company from UPS, USPS, FedEx, freight companies, etc. An example, a 35-pound box shipped from port to 30 miles away would cost approximately $10 using Amazon partner carriers, right? A 35-pound box, if you were to have UPS go pick it up and ship it, or if you were to go get it at the port, take it to the UPS store, and they were to ship it for you, it would cost approximately 40 bucks using non-partner carriers, or not using Amazon's partner carrier system. 4x, 4 times as much. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's a little less, but it's a significant difference. Amazon pays really low shipping rates. That's how they're winning. Okay, that's how they've been able to pull off this Amazon Prime model over the years. Is their shipping rates they've locked in with all these companies. Note, when using a freight forwarder, you can just have them handle the domestic freight arrangements for you, which would make it easier on you with their door-to-door service. But they typically charge more than if you were to use Amazon partner carriers. Okay, lots of freight forwarders, however, will get into your Amazon FBA system and use the partner carriers. Okay, you just got to make sure you pay attention to the freight forwarder's quote and when you're talking to them to find out. When freight costs to move goods halfway across the U.S. can add up to the same as the entire trip from China to the U.S., then saving where you can is prudent. Easy peasy, right? All right, that concludes this very long lesson, but hey, we're talking about shipping, right? This is kind of a big topic. It has everything to do with a big chunk of your cost of the goods sold and your landed cost, a big chunk of the landed cost of your products, the amount of money it costs you to have the product made and landed at the Amazon distribution centers ready to ship out to the customers. That landed cost, a big chunk of that is shipping, is the transport costs, right? Which we've been going through all the components of that. So that's why this is a long lesson, and that's why this is a long lesson, and it's really important that you can nail these things down where you can to save the most money. 20 years from now, you will be more disappointed by the things you didn't do than those you did. So throw off the bow lines, sail away from safe harbor. Mark Twain. I liked this because, well, it's boats sailing away from the harbor. But I'm giving you all the components of getting your product shipped from overseas to the United States and then to the Amazon distribution centers. I'm helping you understand every step along the way and where to save money and where to save time and anxiety, right? So hire a freight forwarder, right? Check more than one rate. Get rates from your supplier's shipping freight forwarder that they use and compare those rates to the freight forwarder rates that you get from your freight forwarder that you're contacting. Remember, back on the resources page, there's Freightos, there's a lot of different freight forwarders. I'm going to talk to you about some new freight forwarders in the next lesson. It's all about sustainable transport, sustainable shipping. But where you can cut costs, do so. And hopefully I've helped you with that in these lessons today, to be able to know where some of those points are and to really save some hassle and just hire a freight forwarder. That's, unless you really have a strong desire to learn about the international shipping system and the logistics involved in all that, and to have your hands all over that and your time and your energies, it serves you better to hire somebody else to handle all these things for you. Hopefully this lesson has shown you that it's kind of complicated and you're best off going the easier route. It might be slightly more expensive, but in the long run, it saves you time and energy, which equates to money. Okay. Spend your time more wisely, making a better listing, researching your next product, going out and hustling for some funds to place a bigger order next time. Get out on social media to promote your product and your brand. Spend your time and energies doing those things, not on handling shipping logistics. All right, that's enough out of me. I thank you for being here in this lesson. I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Take it easy.